Hi, this is Larry Castle with Rich Carrico for episode 53 of That's a Good Question. How important is serving in the church? Well, as you can see from the titles we had on the bottom of the screen, that Pastor Ken is out of town this week, and so we have the privilege of having one of our other pastors, Pastor Rich Carrico, here with us this week for That's a Good Question. And Pastor Ken's traveling this week. He's visiting a conference for church planting that we're a part of, a group we're a part of for church planting. And so Pastor Rich graciously agreed to take time out of his schedule this week. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means for a guy in his position to do that as we go on and discuss today the topic. But I'm really thankful that he was willing to take this time out today. I think you're going to have some helpful insights just for us, for the church in general, when we talk about the idea of why is service so important. So really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thanks, Pastor. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Well, so the topic, as we said, is how important is it to serve in the church? And we'll probably get there eventually. I'm thinking as we go through the discussion, we're going to talk a lot about what it means to serve in the church and what it's been like for us over the years to be engaged in ministry, service in the church. And then by the time we get to the end of it, hopefully we'll have answered the question, how important is it? So let's jump right in. The first question I wanted to discuss with you is, what are some of the ways that you've served in the church over the years? It's been, you've been involved in our church for almost, 20 years now?
Yes.
But then you were serving long before that, right?
We're going back a lot of years now, so I had to kind of think about those early years, and I believe that our service is a progression as we go throughout the years, but we are where we're at when we start to serve. So back at the first church that I attended right after high school, one of the areas that I helped serving in was just basically some manual labor. I had learned how to paint that summer. And so when I came back, Pastor Ken was leading our college and career class. So we had this little side room that we met in, and so we kind of wanted to make it a little bit more conducive to college and career types, and just be able to have that as our space. So I really started off just painting that room, and I just remember the satisfaction, the joy that I had from that. That certainly spurred me on, knowing that I was working for the Lord and serving the Lord. Up to that point, certainly through school, you have all this head knowledge, and now you're starting to put it into practice. So that certainly made a big difference for me.
I think of, as you described that, I think of, maybe it's being a child of the 80s, but I think of the Karate Kid. You remember he wanted to learn karate. And the first thing he had to do was paint a fence, or I think he had to wax the porch first. But, and the teacher was trying to get him to do some basic things that would be a part of what he was going to teach him later. And joking aside, that's kind of what was happening there as I hear you describe that. So you wanted to serve. Folks found something that, regardless of what preparation level you were at, you could do that was contributing to the mission of what the church was doing. And to the onlooker who doesn't have the big picture of ministry, that might look like, well, they just kind of were getting free labor out of you. But you just mentioned it was teaching you to, be faithful, to devote the abilities God gave you to work that contributed to the mission the church was doing. That's just a really good example.
Okay.
And I think people might think of that if, let's say, that's something, the kind of work somebody's engaged in their church right now. They might not think of it as important, but that was, as we're going to go on and talk, I think probably foundational and very important at the time too, that you got done, right?
It was, and it was something that it was kind of like on my own volition, really. I thought this would be a nice thing to be able to do, so it wasn't necessarily maybe in an official capacity, but from there, the church at that time needed someone to pick up members in Detroit. So I got in the van, and I could drive, and so I drove this old beat-up van down to Detroit every Sunday, and I think on Wednesdays as well, picking up members in the community and also down in Detroit. So that was an area there that that certainly I was qualified to be able to participate in. So I was appreciative for that. Later on, became a deacon in our church. And then I was given the task of being treasurer of the church. So, like
Wow.
I said, I've talked about that many times through the years of being treasurer all these years. But that I think that goes back quite some time. But shortly thereafter of when I started serving in the church. So, certainly the Lord was preparing me for different areas of service. I can't say that at any one time I felt like, hey, this one position was just made for me. I've got this, no problem. So, but it's been a progression.
So
through the years.
they were all work, you're saying?
They were all work, yes. They were all work, and then got involved in the men's ministry. That was just an area that Pastor Ken had talked about through the years. He wanted somebody to be able to serve in. And I just felt at that point that the Lord wanted me to, take another step in service and in being able to do something where I was giving back to people and maybe investing in other people's lives. So that position was open, and I went to Pastor. I said, hey, you've been talking about this all these years. Nobody's stepped up to the plate. So, how about giving me a crack at it? And, what could he say at that point? So it's like, we don't have anybody else. You're as good as any. So go ahead and do it.
I have a hard time thinking we just settled for you. You've done a really good job with the men's ministry.
Well, I've enjoyed that. But again, it's been a progression. The Lord has prepared me for different areas of service, and now serving on the pastoral staff, lay elder, and working with our young men for Leadership Institute.
And when you say lay elder, I just want to highlight, you don't mean like, half of a pastor or not really doing the job of a pastor. It's just you have another occupation. You don't do it vocationally. We're not paying you to be a pastor. You're a pastor. You make time in your schedule to do pastoral ministry in addition to running and owning your own business, right? So that's when you say lay pastor, that's what you mean. Yes.
I'm not on staff full-time. I do work a job and get beat up in the world just like most of our members do. And it gives me a different appreciation for what our members go through in terms of, allocating time for service, because, when you allocate time for service, generally it's during your off hours. And so there's a commitment for that. So I certainly understand that.
Yeah. And then you mentioned Leadership Institute, so kind of an extension of our men's ministry and taking men who are interested in pursuing leadership in their homes, leadership in the church, and so helping train them and prepare them to do that and to improve at that, right?
Yeah, we look at some different areas. What is the mission of the church and how we live that out. So we look at really, issues regarding the church and the mission. And we kind of work through those issues because it gives our men an opportunity really to kind of see the rationale, the philosophy behind what we do and what we need to do as a church. In fact, some of the ideas that they've brought up, I've brought before the leadership team as well. So that we can look at maybe doing that in the future. Constantly
evaluating what's our mission as a church and how are we doing in accomplishing it? Are there other things we can do to move us forward on the mission? That's good. So you've described a lot of service, and I noticed as you described it, there's a progression from kind of initiated, beginning level, not a high threshold of preparation needed, just painting something and driving a van, but progressing so that you were doing then things that required more outside preparation, things that required a higher level of commitment. I mean, being a deacon, that's being a leader, an official office of the church, our pastors and deacons. And so a lot more responsibility there. Things you were opening yourself up to evaluation of your life and your family at that point to qualify for that office. And then being the church's treasurer, that's a very, and another kind of both feet in, a lot of work involved in that, and a lot of responsibility. Everybody's trusting you to keep the finances organized and stuff. So I noticed the pattern there of increasing responsibility. And I'm guessing people didn't go, hey, he painted the fence really well, let's make him the treasurer. You demonstrated faithfulness over a period of time. And then as you were faithful in the smaller things, if you will, things of lesser responsibility, you were entrusted with more. And that's a
Yes.
great pattern, I think, for us to keep in mind as we think about service.
Yeah, and I think about what Tim Robinson, in fact, he worked with community service at one point, and he said, which I believe, that we have to be willing to serve where there's opportunities right now. So it might not necessarily be something that you say, hey, this is something I really have a huge passion for, but it's a need within the church, and we have to recognize and realize that we're here to serve one another. So if the church isn't being cleaned, that impacts people.
That's why I chuckled. I always think of Tim using the example of not a lot of people have a passion for the toilet cleaning ministry.
Right, and that's a part of service where that we recognize that it's all important. It's all service, to our King, and we should be willing to be able to get involved in those areas. And then as we continue to be faithful in those areas, then greater responsibility is given.
Yeah, that's great. So we talked about all that. We heard the progression and the different ways in which you served. So this, to me, tells me you've got a high view of service. It's been a high priority for you for a long time. How did you form your view of the role of service in the church and the importance of service in the church?
Really, there's a couple of things that come to mind. Certainly, the significance of serving. When we consider, Romans 12:1, to present our bodies as living sacrifices, for this is your, spiritual act of worship or service. So all of life is worship. It's serving to God in whatever capacity we're in at that particular time. It could be, raising our kids at home, managing their households. It could be at work, wherever we're at. We're to present our bodies as living sacrifices. So certainly that is a major, is certainly impacted me in my life in different areas I service, and always kind of recognizing that I'm always serving, I'm always worshiping the Lord. And I think if we're not cognizant of that, then we can just get into whatever I want to do, and becomes more self-centered. So certainly
I think that's important. What you said there, you mentioned things inside the church and outside of the church, in the work life and home life. And I think it's easy for people to gravitate toward one or the other. A lot of times I hear the description of service by folks given as, I like to invite people over to eat and that kind of thing. And certainly it's not less than that. That's what we want. We want people to be carrying out one another ministry in the church and doing it as a way of life, rather than someone comes to you and says, can you invite them over? We're not assigning that. But then in addition to that, we're all moving forward as a church, and we have certain strategic initiatives we're doing. So we have a children's ministry where we're trying to train up our children, and we have teen ministry, and we have men's ministry, and then we have outreach ministry. So doing the one where you're in all of your life, you're seeing your work as ministry, you're seeing your home life as ministry, but you're also viewing that you're a member of the church and you're serving, you're engaged there as well. Doing all of those and seeing all of it as ministry is important, not just one to the neglect of the other, right?
Yes. And then the other thing is there's probably, and I've mentioned it before, there's probably like a handful of things that have impacted my life. Certainly one of them, Pastor Brown has always said that today counts towards eternity. And really, if you really grasp onto that what we do today does impact our eternity. And I'll talk, maybe a little bit more about that later. But in terms of, there is reward, but we want to serve the Lord. So whatever we do today, we want to make sure that that it does impact our eternity. So taking an eternal perspective has certainly impacted the way that I serve. It certainly keeps me on track. It certainly helps me persevere. Because, serving, like I said, you're primarily serving at times within the church on your off hours. So you need to have something that helps you to persevere. But certainly that is something that has really impacted me in terms of, service. And I believe that in life, and I'm guilty of it just as anyone, but we settle for far less in this life. Things that really are not going to matter, that are not going to necessarily impact our eternity, or, being able to serve one another in the church. We have a high calling in life. And so I want to make sure that I prioritize what is important and make sure that I'm living that out on a daily basis.
Yeah, it is a very easy trap to fall into, to live for the mere earthly goals that all of our counterparts in the world live for. Have a good job, have a nice house, have a nice family. Those are blessings from God if you can have those things. But like you're saying, there's so much more beyond that. Whether you have a nice house or not, your life can be full, and you can be living for the purpose God made you, even if you're poor.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you don't need what the world says is valuable to have what God says is valuable.
That's true. And the older I get, the more I realize that. I mean, when you're young, I mean, you have goals for, career. I want to get to this certain point in life with my career. I want to get to this certain level of, income. I want to have, nice house. You want to have nice things for your family. But the older you get, the more that you realize that what is the true value in those things. I mean, again, they do accomplish things, but it's about what's done for Christ is really what's going to matter in the end.
Yeah.
So we need to take these in, perspective of what they are. I mean, we do have to earn livings to support our family. That's
a stewardship.
That's stewardship, and we want to be able to do that. But we also want to keep it in perspective as well. So the older you get, you realize that those things aren't quite as important as you originally thought that they were, and it forces you really to concentrate on really what is important in life.
Yeah, I've over the years teaching the teenagers here, I've used this example. I think I mentioned in an episode a couple weeks ago, but and I've seen it bear fruit in my own family's life, and that is, there's nothing wrong with having things and being prosperous, working hard and seeing the fruit of your labor, but you have to view it as a stewardship, not as a consumer. You have to look at the things God allows you to benefit with by way of material benefits as tools, not toys. And if you look at them as tools, so God blesses me in my work, it's good. I should be faithful at my work. It's part of that ministry you talked about. But if I'm just doing it so I can have a bigger boat,
right.
Nothing wrong with boats. But if that's all I'm doing just so I can have a bigger boat for my own personal pleasure, then you're saying we're settling for way less than God would like to give us.
Yes. And like in your early years, like I said, you have goals. I mean, I'm doing it career-wise exactly what I wanted to do. That was my goal, to be an owner of a business. So I'm able, the Lord has blessed me, and I'm able to live that out. But really, in reality, I mean, it can't compare with, being able to serve the Lord in all these different areas. So, if you get to that point in life and you're looking back and you're saying, yeah, hey, this is what I wanted, this big house or this career or whatever it might be that you set your heart's desires on, you're going to be disappointed in the end, because it is not going to be, what the Lord had for you in terms of, what's really going to impact your eternity. And so I've tried to keep that in mind, and the things of this world just are not going to be what's really going to give you the joy and the satisfaction that the Lord would have. It's only in Him and what we can do for Him. It's not that owning a business or having the career is a bad thing, but what are we doing with it? To impact His cause, spreading His glory, and also impacting our eternity.
Good things, but not an end in themselves.
Right.
Yeah. So as we talk about the question that I posed, how do you form the view of service, the role, the importance of service that you have? I also think of models that we had in our life, and you may have some that you could share, but I'll embarrass you first by saying, well, I go way back to, I think of my youth pastor, Tracy Fressel, and the example of service that he set for me and my wife when we were young. We were, in high school, seeing that and getting us as very young people involved in ministry. That was a great example. And then getting involved in this church plant and meeting you and Pastor Ken and seeing you guys, we had a young family, 3 kids at the time, but seeing you guys basically all in, everything you had. I mean, both of you were working full-time jobs elsewhere and starting the church. And so it was not a weird thing for me to come in as a seminary student, also working full-time, to do the same thing. It's just what we did, right? And so the model that you guys set was very helpful for us. And then I think this wasn't because I was wise or anything. It was just because of having that model there and following it. My children had that model then. All of our kids grew up living in the home of church planters, and pretty much life was service. And I hear my kids talk about service now that way, and they're all involved doing different things in the church. And I think they picked that up not only by what we said, but it was just the way we lived. And in hindsight, I'm so thankful that God put us in places where we, it was His grace. It wasn't that I went, hey, a wise strategy would be if I, just make life all about service. I wasn't that strategic about it. I kind of had an idea of that. But in hindsight's where I really see the value of that. So I think of the models as really important. And so I say to parents and those of us older in the church, as you serve, thinking about not only the service you're rendering for the work we're doing together, but the example you're providing for those who come after us. So are there examples you think of, role models that helped you form that philosophy in addition to the biblical principles you said?
Actually, at one time, I did go to a church that there's one fella in there. He was a business owner, and I called him Uncle Jerry. And he just had a great attitude. I mean, he always had a smile on his face. I still remembered his. He wore these wingtips, and at that time, they had kind of like the toes were kind of like curled up, And I always remember those big wingtips that he used to walk around. He was kind of a short guy. But he was just committed. And, at that point, I mean, we didn't have, I thought of some of the pastors that were at that church, and they certainly, I don't believe that they were the caliber, like Pastor Brown, but he stayed committed. He was committed to serving. He used his business and the monies that he was able to earn to be able to pour back into the mission. I mean, he gave the missionaries. I mean, he was one of the most benevolent men that I met, and certainly, I just saw his commitment to the mission, and that really impacted me, And it wasn't because of his circumstances around him. He had a commitment to serving Christ, and he lived it out in every area of his life, and certainly, I just observed it. It wasn't like it was like there was a mentorship that I had with him,
right.
But I just saw him living, day in and day out, serving the Lord and his commitment to it. And it had an impact on me.
That's good. So I think of, as we talk about biblical principles and examples, I'm thinking of the section of our Membership 101 class where we talk about that. And I won't go over it in detail because there are some other questions I'd like to get while we've got you here. But we talk about 1 Peter 4, 10, and 11, and it talks about each of us using the gifts that we've received to serve others. And when we do it to speak, if anyone has a speaking gift, to use it like they're speaking the very words of God. And the purpose of this is so that in all things God will be praised through Christ, and to him will be the glory and the power. And we summarize that with this little sentence in the class, and that is that we are to use the gifts that we've been given, and that portion of it highlights the fact that the gifts are from God. We're just not born with this talent just by chance. God gifts us specifically for the work that he has for us to do. And so we use the gifts we've been given for the good of others, so we're serving each other like you highlighted earlier. And then with a holy confidence, and it's not a self-confidence, it's not that I'm convinced of how great I am, so I just jump in, no fear. Right. But I'm convinced that God gave me the gifts that I have, and so I can use them. If I have the voice, I don't. In fact, as I clear my throat, I do not have the voice to sing in church. If you sit by me, I sound okay in a group, but you don't want me up front singing. But if I did have a beautiful voice, some people might have that gift, but are self-conscious, and so they don't want to get up there. And what we're talking about, using gifts that God's given us with a holy confidence, is forgetting about self and saying, how has God gifted me? I'm confident not because of me, but because God's the one who gifted me, and he doesn't make mistakes.
Yes.
And then doing all of that for his glory. So we're not focused on self. We're focused on how this can direct attention and glory to God. So we use the gifts we've been given for the good of others with holy confidence for the glory of God. And that kind of summarizes, that's a mature formation of what I was learning growing up with my view of service. People taught it to me by their example mostly, like you described. But then as I began teaching this class for our new members, that's a really concise way to summarize it. So I want to get to a couple of other questions as we finish up here, though, because believe it or not, we're already almost at 30 minutes. The time flies when we're having a discussion like this. But I wanted to find out, because service comes with its challenges, and I wanted to ask you about that. What are some of the biggest challenges to serving that you've faced over the years?
Okay. Well, a couple come to mind. Certainly, there's the busyness of life, and we're all busy with life. I certainly know that. When you have family, you have your job, you're managing the household, wherever the Lord has you at that particular point in your life. It's the busyness of life, So when you're serving, maybe you have one ministry that you're serving within the church, along with being salt and light in the world. You're primarily doing that in your off hours, or on the weekend. And, I'm just as guilty. I mean, we get to the weekend, it's like, hey, I'd like to have, I'd like to have some time off this weekend,
I want to highlight this because I don't think you'll say it. But so here we are 20 years into this church plant, and you were doing it before that at your previous church, our parent church. And you're doing this in your off hours as very involved in your insurance business, and now as the owner of it, and you're still doing that. And I have the blessing now of being paid for the work I do in ministry, but that's only a couple years old. So both of us, and even our senior pastor, Pastor Ken, for how many years? The first 12, 13 more years of the church?
Sure.
He
yes.
worked another job as well.
Yes.
So it's very tempting. You're doing it in the off hours. It's very tempting to say, I just don't have time to do much. But it's a matter of, we do what's really important to us. So taking an approach to what you do in life, seeing it as a tool, like we talked about earlier. This is what I've observed in you doing. Use it as a tool, and then saying, all right, so service is a priority. I'm gonna make sure that I fit that in. And then you might not take as much overtime. A person might not be making as much money as they could be making because
absolutely.
they're fitting
Right.
time for service. And I said about kids earlier, and I just can't emphasize enough. I emphasize this to parents of teens over the years. It's one thing to tell your kids what's important, but they see every day, every week, what really matters to us. And I just can't express enough my gratitude to the Lord that he led our path such that our kids saw service a lot, because that's what they do now. It's just, it's part of life.
And that's, no pain, no gain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when you're serving during your off hours, I mean, that, like with kids, just kind of tying in with kids. I mean, we took our kid, if we did anything right with parenting, we made a lot of mistakes. But one thing that I thought
you teach the parenting class, don't you?
Well, trust me, I've learned a lot since then. I wish I could have used during those
some things the hard way, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But we really engaged our kids in our ministry. We took our kids with us in ministry. So when we were, managing the events here, we would load the van up, with all the things that we needed, because we didn't have a church building at that time, and so they would help us load the van. And then we got there, then we would unload the van, and then we were there to help out with the event and make sure that we cleaned up, and then we did that process all over again to get everything back downstairs again. When we did door hangers, I would take Nick and Jessica with me. I remember taking them in the wagon, and we would take it.
I remember that, yeah.
So
the kids looked forward to stuff like that.
They looked forward to that stuff. So, again, that is, the busyness of life. You're saying, I don't want to do it. There's always something that you'd rather do, I believe.
Or could be doing.
Be doing.
There's always
Absolutely.
more you could do,
So you have to make it a priority really to do it. But there is great, great benefit when you do that. And another area I think is certainly, I think that most of us, as you go and get involved in other ministries, I think that, there is a certain inadequacy that you might feel. It's like, man, I just don't know if I'm prepared for this. And I would just say to whoever, if you need help in a ministry, let us know. I mean, we'll get you the education, we'll figure it out, whatever it is. I mean, don't just sit there thinking, hey, I'm inadequate, I don't know what to do or whatever. But, I think, too, we always think that, there's got to be somebody else who can do this better than me. So, again, I think that there's some good in that because we constantly need to be relying on our strength from the Lord and for Him to be able to help us out. We're not doing this in our own strength. And so I think that there's going to be some inadequacy that we're going to feel, and we need to be able to push through that. Obviously, we need to be able to rely on the strength from the Lord to be able to help us in our ministries.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all good examples of the struggles that you'd face. The time I really felt when our kids were really little, we ended up doing our vacations a lot of times were a youth group trip, and we took our kids on some of those with us. And then family camp, we started doing family camps. And so, but again, I wouldn't change that. I think the kids learned a lot through that, and they looked forward to it. We're going to family camp tomorrow. We head out to family camp, and our kids are going with us even as adult children now. And every year they just looked forward to it so much. So getting them involved. And so you're using that then as an asset instead of a drawback to ministry. That's good. So what advice then, we've given a lot of advice kind of by the way already, but what advice do you think of when you are advising young people? So we've got our Crossroads section of our church. We've got the young married families, young children. As they're just getting started out, what kind of advice do you give them regarding serving?
I would tell them start now. Because life just gets busier the older you get. The more responsibilities that you have. You start getting involved in career or managing your household. So life just gets busier. So, what is your entry point at that point? So
if you're waiting for something, it's not going to come around.
If you're waiting for the clouds to just kind of, move apart.
Finally, I have no obligations and endless funds. Let's get serving.
Yeah, that is not going to happen. That's not going to happen down here. So I would encourage you to start now because, really, if you think about it, I mean, if you're not willing to make the commitment now, what makes you think that in the future you're going to be able to make that commitment? Now, again, it's not that the Lord can't work in your life and, you get things straightened around that you're not able to do it, or you have something that's preventing you from. But I would encourage
there are seasons where someone might need to take a little slower. Yeah.
Yes, but start now.
Yeah.
Build your life around God's Word, learning God's Word, living God's Word in His church and serving. Certainly something, I bring this up that, just to kind of sober us up as well, is that 2 Corinthians 5:10, talks about that we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. I mean, our works are going to be evaluated. And so certainly this is a sobering thought that we need to keep in mind. It's not just, I just wasn't able to get around to things. Don't live with regret. You don't want to look back on your life with regret. So that's why I would say get involved now. Certainly, we're going to give an account for our works someday.
And we dealt with that issue in a whole episode a couple weeks ago, and I'll link to that above. There should be a link right now if I do my job right that you can click on and listen to a whole episode about that evaluation Pastor Rich is talking about.
And I would also say, there's reward. I believe that the Scriptures bear out that our earthly faithfulness somehow will impact our eternity. There's a heavenly or eternal treasure that is built up, and I don't know what that looks like, but I do know that I believe that there is a reward with that. So certainly that is something that we would want to keep in mind as well. But again, getting involved as soon as you possibly can.
That's good. Well, let's finish off then. Last question I've got for you, I think it's the last question here, is what are some of the benefits of serving? And I formed the question as this: expected and unexpected. Because at least on my part, I learned along the way there are some benefits that I didn't realize at first, and just looking back on, I'm very grateful for. But what do you think? What are some benefits of serving?
I would say that certainly with serving, and I learned this in Every Man a Warrior, one of our programs that we have for our men, is 1 Peter 4:19, where it talks about if you're in suffering, to continue to do good, to continue to serve. So I think that it helps redirect. It helps us to refocus on what's important when we're going through trials and difficulties in this earth. So I think that that's something that was a little unexpected for me that I thought of. Certainly, I think it's keeping the important things important in our life. Serving will help us do that. It'll keep us on a track. And then one thing as well, one thing that I learned, in fact, I just hired somebody at our church, in our business, and he's a believer. And one thing that I communicated to him is that, skills that from serving in the church, skills that I've learned in the church, I've been able to use in the business world. And those skills that I've been able to learn in the business world, I've been able to use in the church, in my serving. Yeah. So there's a connectedness there between serving in the local church and also taking it out into the world. So certainly that's been a huge benefit for me.
That goes into what we were talking about earlier, the holistic view of life. I mean, all of life is service, and those things tie together. I can't tell you how surprising it has been to me to look back and things I learned in work, in my secular jobs over the years that have come in so useful in ministry. And then vice versa. I got promotions at work in my work life in the secular job using skills I learned in youth ministry, like promoting things, making flyers and stuff like that, crazy things you wouldn't think of.
Yes. Yeah. And the last thing I'd say is just it's a great training ground for our children that we're bringing up. And I can certainly think, my daughter, Jessica, she went through a counseling program so that she can counsel people. I mean, I know that she's seen myself and my wife, and probably looked at me and said, "Hey, I need more training than what Dad has."
I thought you were going to say she looked at you and said, "People need to know how to counsel others."
So she's done that. So she's been able to use that, and I know that the Lord, she's in a different phase of life right now where she has young children. So I believe that she'll be able to get back to that in a big way in the future. And certainly, I remember taking Nick around to put door hangers on doors. And today he's doing that same thing in the city of Detroit with the church that he's attending, and being able to just talk to people. So certainly, it's a great training ground, services with your children, and it'll make a big difference in their lives.
Yeah, that's great. Well, the topic of service in the church is vitally important. I mean, we're called, as we talked over the last several weeks, about the centrality of the church to what God's doing in his world and our mission together, and a lot of topics around the church. None of that happens without us coming together and using the gifting God's given us to push forward in the mission that he's given us together. So I hope this has been a stimulating discussion for you, thought-provoking. And don't let it stop there. Let it motivate you if you're not engaged and want to get engaged more. I happen to lead the community service ministry at our church. Come see me. Shoot me an email if you'd like to be more engaged in serving, and I'll help find a place for you here. And Pastor Rich, can't thank you enough for your example over the years and for taking the time today to talk with us about this important subject.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, don't forget, if you don't already subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that little notification bell so you know when new videos come out. And this is such a helpful topic. Share it with somebody. Share the video with somebody who you think would benefit. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode. If you have a question you'd like us to consider, you can send that in to our email address, info@cbctrenton.com, or text it to us at 97000.